Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
and I'm Sarah, and we are back for Season 2, Episode 3. And thank you again for coming back if you've been following along with us this whole time. And hello to anybody that's new. And I'm excited for another episode.
Yeah, this is Season 2, where we are watching Film Noir movies. So excited to see what we're going to drink tonight.
Kicking it real old
watch.
school.
Yeah.
So,
Don't think we have any podcast
I was going
business
to say, I don't have any podcast
So I guess we'll hop into what are we drinking tonight?
Tonight, we are drinking a 2017 Silver Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon from Tobin James, which I'm excited about. Like I was telling him before we started, is Cab Sav's usually like my go-to red wine, but my go-to red wine is like $8.
A nice Cab Sav.
That I'm excited to try this. And
a step up or two from the black box.
Yes.
So let's give it a try. Very, very fragrant. Like a lot of, it's like cherry, berry, I guess, on the nose.
Yeah, cherry for sure.
Apparently,
sorry, I could feel that coming. I was trying to smell it, but I couldn't do it. Yeah, I get that cherry for sure.
Ooh, a lot of cherry on the first taste.
Oh yeah, very tart cherry.
Yeah, this is delicious.
But it's very, very flavorful. I feel like it's got a lot more notes and levels to it than your everyday grocery store Cab Sav.
Yeah, for sure. Much more complex than a boxed wine.
Oh, for sure. It's going to be a real hard step from this Cab Sav
to the after show wine
to the box wine.
Yeah.
And again, I had a glass of black box the other night, and by itself, and it was like, okay, this
no
is
offense
fine.
to black box.
But when you go from like a small winery, like really crafted wine, to a box wine, it's just it's a different experience.
I made a mistake eating a peppermint patty right before this started, so it's kind of ruining my my taste of this wine, but I'm sure it'll get much better as that taste subsides and it gets replaced with the wine.
Yeah, I've never been more grateful to turn down a peppermint patty than right now.
Bold choice.
Okay, so now it's time to go behind the screens. Oh no. And where each week we go behind the big screens of Hollywood and look into some aspect of film production or storytelling. So I'm going to kick it over to you.
So this week we are going behind the production part of it, as you said, looking into the film producer role. Previously, we looked at the executive producer, which was much more about like management and logistics and making sure like the budget was approved and finding sources of money or funding for the movie. The film producer is a bit more involved in the creative aspect of it. Usually, finds the material that they actually want to make for the movie, gets a director, a screenwriter, and gets the script kind of put together, the screenplay and everything all put together, and supervises the pre-production of the film, and then can also have some input into all the other creative parts of it, like casting and whatnot, deciding on locations.
So a lot more hands-on than
a lot more hands-on,
producer.
a lot more part of the creative process, a bit less of kind of just the bank for the movie. During production, obviously, the director is like the main creative person, but sometimes the producer can have some input in there. And the producer is also very involved in the post-production, giving some sort of feedback, having test screenings. And if, say, the audience in the test screening doesn't approve of a certain point, the producer may have them go back out and shoot more scenes or recut the movie to get a good response to it. In some movies, they've like in the example they gave, a main character died at the end of a movie. The audience didn't like that. They recut it to not have the main character die, and then went on to have several sequels. So must have been a good choice by the producer there.
I feel like that would be so interesting to have that, like such a zoomed out view of a movie from just getting a bunch of words on a piece of paper and then finding your director and how you want that creative vision to go and casting, and then seeing the the shooting stuff, and then after like just seeing that all come together would have to be so cool.
Yeah, I feel like I would butt heads a lot with the director though if I couldn't be in charge of everything. So I feel like that's
true.
I imagine there's probably a lot of cases where the producer and the director definitely butt heads, but I guess it works out in the end.
But I also feel like if you're a producer, you're also probably choosing directors that and that their style and that you kind of have similar vision with, that's going to take your vision and bring it to life.
Yeah, or in some cases, like a director has a production company or a producer has like a specific set of directors that they're going to choose for their movies. It's always going to be the same, 2 or 3 directors when they can get them. But the movie that I mentioned where the main character died in the original cut of the movie, is one that we plan to watch later. I've seen it before, but I hope I remember to bring that back up to you if and when we get around to watching it.
Okay, that's going to be 100% on you to remember.
Good luck to me.
Yeah.
So
oh, gosh.
that wraps up the role of the film producer. Obviously, there are a whole lot of other subsets of the producer role, a lot of underlings, and just, there's a million tasks. And as movies have become much more complex, I'm sure the number of different types of sub-producers has just grown and grown and grown.
Definitely. Very interesting. Thank you for that insight.
Mm-hmm.
I will say all of these deep dives into the different positions has given me a different view on movies and just like thinking about it a little bit differently each week.
What it makes me miss though is the DVD behind the scenes extras.
Well, I always miss that.
That's something that the age of streaming is really lost. I don't know if there's a good way to get that. I know on some streaming services you can click on the movie and then scroll down to see more. I don't know if that's something we can find more for a lot of these movies, because I do just really miss those sometimes. Especially
do you
for
think there are
movies.
DVD extras for the Maltese Falcon?
Probably not. I would be surprised if there's any extra footage, but
right. All right. Are you ready to jump into Slept on It?
Sure.
So last week we watched The Maltese Falcon from 1941, and we rated the movie. You rated it a 6.1, and I rated it a 5.8. Does your rating change after sleeping on it?
I don't think so. I did already take into account rewatchability. There wasn't too much quotability for it. I don't think I could find anything that would make me really bump it up. I did enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
6.1 feels about right.
I stand pretty firm with mine too. Like you said, not very quotable.
Mm-hmm.
I probably want to see it again, maybe sometime in my life, just to follow it all, knowing the story, and kind of see if I take any more from it. But and it was good. I mean, it was better than last week. It was not the best movie I've ever seen, but that's also because I'm watching it almost 100 years after it came out.
Yeah. And so my ratings are generally kind of somewhat just pulled out of thin air, but I do try to take into account how much I enjoyed it, obviously, first and foremost, how quotable it is, how rewatchable it is, how likely am I going to say, tonight I want to go sit down, seek out this movie and rewatch it again. And the fourth one is, if it was on, how likely would I be just to pick it up, midway through or a quarter of the way through and just finish it? And I don't think I'd really would pick it up and watch it all the way through, or sit down and seek it out and watch it all the way through. I might watch bits and pieces of it if it's on TV, but I'm not going to sit down and be I want to watch this all the way through. I love the ending or anything. So that's why I'm kind of saying I would sit down or I'd keep it at the 6.1 that I had.
Yeah. All right. So time to go into our deep dives or shallow dives, depending on how we're feeling when we sit down to research these each week. Would you like me to start?
Sure.
So last week I started with researching the film noir genre, and I decided that there is a lot to be learned about the film noir genre. So each week I'll be going a little deeper into it. And so this week I kind of looked at its inspiration and I talked about the meaning of the word film noir, black film or dark film in French. And this week it's more of when the term started being used and all that kind of stuff. So it didn't actually they didn't start using the term film noir in Hollywood until 1946. French critic Nino Frank was the one who chose the word film noir, and it was not recognized by most of the American film industry during that era. At the time, those classic noir films were referred to as melodramas instead, and it seems like it wasn't until closer to the 70s when the film noir phrase was used for that genre. There's also apparently a lot of hot debate of whether or not film noir is an actual genre or if it's more of just a style of filmmaking, or I forget the exact word they use.
How it's made necessarily doesn't have to be a crime thing, is what you're saying. It should be the way it's filmed.
Yeah. So I can look more into that for what the discussion is behind that. I can add that in next week, but that's to be debated by the people who are really passionate about these movies. And then the actual style of filmmaking for film noir was influenced by German Expressionism, which was an artistic movement of the 1910s and 1920s that involved theater, music, photography, painting, sculpture, and architecture, as well as cinema. So it comes from Germany. And the opportunities offered by the booming Hollywood film industry, and then the threat of Nazism that led to the immigration of many film artists working in Germany is kind of what brought that expressionist movement here to America and when we started using it. So
makes sense that it would be then in the 40s that it would kind of start up.
Yeah. So that's a little bit more of where film noir comes from and how it got here and where we stand with that. And then my next deep dive is, which this kind of leads right into it, is World War II in Hollywood, and what we kind of talked last week about how Maltese Falcon was filmed in 1941, and that's right in the middle of World War II, and
really starting to pick up.
How did Hollywood play a role in that? And there's a lot of information out there. I'm going to try to be brief and succinct, but
I'll put 60 seconds on the clock.
It was all very interesting. But Hollywood did play a major role in World War II. Less than 2 weeks after Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt declared that the movie industry could make a very useful contribution to the war effort. That was all a quote for those of you listening. And most of the contributions that Hollywood made was for morale. Many of the movies produced during the war were patriotic rallying cries that affirmed a sense of national purpose, and combat films of the war years emphasized patriotism, group effort, and the value of individual sacrifices for a larger cause. So I think that was a lot of what they were trying to do, is everybody gives up a little bit so that we can all be successful, and trying to like push that, since so many people were giving up so much during that time. And then also, within a year, 12% of the whole film industry had entered into the armed forces. So a big portion of Hollywood was overseas fighting, including Clark Gable, Henry Fonda, and Jimmy Stewart. And by the end of the war, a quarter of Hollywood's male employees were in uniform. So it's a pretty big size of it in those days. Hollywood also took a hit, like most of the country, and the government cut the available film stock by 25% and restricted the money that could be spent on sets to $5,000 per movie. The last thing is that they invented like 2 bureaus or like committees to oversee the Hollywood industry at the time. So the Office of War Information and the Bureau of Motion Pictures, and they were to kind of just like supervise what was being put out in the movies and making sure that it was like boosting the right information and actually factual. Because apparently at first it was a lot of like, everybody's spying on you, and that was kind of scaring people as opposed to boosting people up. So they had these bureaus to oversee the film industry of Hollywood at the time.
Gotcha.
So Hollywood and the war were very deeply engaged.
Well, on a lighter note, I researched the word dingus, which Humphrey Bogart used to describe the Falcon statuette, and they used the line like, wrap that dingus and like bring it over to wherever. The first time they said it, I was like, that's a funny word. I've heard it every once in a while. And then he said it a lot more than I was prepared for. It just kept coming back. I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's something we use a lot here. So I had never heard that used in that way before. Usually I'd heard dingus being like the way someone would call someone an idiot. And so I looked up the history of that word, and it comes from the Dutch word ding, meaning thing. And they debate whether or not that means like it was like a Latinized word of like thing to make it sound like more of an actual word, or if that would just kind of like became a word born from another word. But essentially it just means thing or thingamajig or whatchamacallit. Like the Wiktionary description had like several of those like thingamabob. Like, and I just was like, that's fun. This one went through and enumerated all these.
Oh man.
So it's just kind of synonymous with that. However, in the U.S. and in Canada, it's become more common to use it in the way that we've heard it of
more like a derogatory,
calling someone like a fool or an idiot. So he used it correctly, especially for that time. Didn't, I think, become more popular of a word for calling someone a fool or an idiot until like the 70s.
Gotcha. I would have never expected that to go there. That's very interesting.
But it makes kind of more sense when you think of ding and thing. So
yeah, the more you know.
Dutch, right?
Very interesting. All right. So any other thoughts on Maltese Falcon?
I think that closes the chapter.
All right. Closing one chapter, on to the next one. So what are we watching tonight?
We are watching The Big Sleep from 1946.
So yet again, another unrated film because it came out before MPAA ratings. So it's not necerily super raunchy and scandalous. It is just not
means
rated.
It's not rated. Predates rating. So let's go ahead and hop in our time machine then and set the stage back to 1946. So the top 3 movies released that year were Song of the South by Walt Disney. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what the times were like there. Number 2 was Notorious, and number 3 was The Best Years of Our Lives. I have heard of Song of the South. I have not heard of the other 2. According to another list, the top 3 did not include Song of the South, but instead included The Razor's Edge. And the estimates for the returns or for the earnings varied widely between those 2 lists. So I don't think they're correct at all.
The information from 1946 is highly
somewhere
limited.
Between 5.75 million and 49 million. So
just this is just a general gist to take us back in time.
The top 3 songs that year were Prisoner of Love by Perry Como, To Each His Own by Eddie Howard, and The Gypsy by Ink Spots. Not heard of any of those, but
I've not heard of the songs. I do know Perry Como because my grandma really likes him.
I wish we could just kind of have those songs like playing in the background, but thanks to all of the, music industry copyright, that would definitely get us blocked. Real quick.
Sorry, we can't really take you back in time and play little clips, but just
I'd be
imagine.
afraid to even play like 3 seconds, knowing how aggressive the algorithms are these days. So The Big Sleep, have you seen it before?
Nope. Have you?
Absolutely not. And I know nothing at all about the movie, other than that it, I guess, is a film noir movie.
Yes. And I do know that Humphrey Bogart is also in this one. I debated whether or not to tell you because I know you don't like to know things, but you would know right away anyways, that I do have to say I did.
Don't tell me if you know this, but I do wonder if there's any more of crossovers between the actors that we have seen. It's been kind of cool seeing some of those minor characters playing other roles in the movies.
Yeah. All I know is Humphrey Bogart, but I'm excited this one, and having my list that we'll bring back in the after show of the, having that checklist in mind to watch it again and keep those things in mind, and having 2 films already in our repertoire. I'm excited to see.
Do you want to take a guess on what this movie will be about, or would you like me to go?
You go.
Okay. My guess is this is some sort of like crime where someone gets like knocked unconscious and is like in a coma, hence the sleep. And they're trying to figure out like who did it and what everything is about before this person wakes up, or hoping this person wakes up, and they don't know if they will. And so it's a big crime, trying to solve it. Also possible witness that may wake up at the end for the big penultimate scene.
Well, now I'm going to be really disappointed if that's not how the movie is, because that sounds very interesting. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
That sounds like While You Were Sleeping, but very different.
Yeah.
Kind of the same, kind of different. I think it's more, again, like private detective route. I was assuming Big Sleep was like someone died. The Big Sleep.
The Big Sleep, yeah.
Death. So I don't have any more specific than that, because now
much more sense. It's more like he's going to be swimming with the fishes type thing of like, yeah.
Ooh, oh gosh.
I hope they use that term.
One of us has to take a shot. We both have to take a shot. If they say he's going to be swimming with the fishes. Oh, just like you said it. Love that. All right. So before I get us into any more trouble with things like that, let's jump into The Big Sleep. Okay. Cheers.
The Big Sleep. Yeah.
For those of you that can't see us, we have some faces.
That was a lot. I feel like, just so many names, and just.
We will talk about our wine, and then we will get into our feelings.
Start with the wine.
That way we can come down a little bit.
Starting with the wine scale. Scale is 0 to 10. The wine scale is heavily weighted in that we always drink good wines. So a low score does not necessarily mean that it is a bad wine. These are all very good wines. That being said,
just a reminder, we drank the 2017 Silver Reserve Tobin James Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yes. I will go first with my rating. I'm going to give it an 8.0.
Wow.
I thought it was
very
shocked. Good. I thought it was very good.
Wow. Now you have me conflicted.
You were going to give it a low score.
No, I was going to give it a 5 even.
5 even?
And I mean, it was good. And I really enjoyed it. And I was thinking maybe more along the lines of like a 6.7. And then towards the end, I was like, I feel like it's like I don't know that this will super stand out to me. But that's also hard.
Yeah, now you got me conflicted. Now I'm leaning towards a 7.
I feel like that's an unfair rating scale at this point, because we were drinking a very nice bottle of wine every week, whereas before it was like we had 50 bottles of this stashed in our cellar, and like the one time every like 6 months we'd be like, oh, let's drink some Tobin James. We would be like, oh my gosh, this is so great, because we'd have that one bottle compared to all the other stuff that's fine.
I liked this a lot better than last week's for sure. I think I'm going to lean closer towards a 7 though,
8 just felt really
just
impressive.
because I'm trying to think, like, I feel like an 8 is one of those ones where it's like I see it on a wine menu and I'm like, oh, we've got to go out of our way to order this. And I'm not sure I'd go that far. Like I would, you know, if I'm looking over and nothing's really speaking out to me, I would be like, well, I know this is good. It was very delightful, bright, you know, little bit complex flavors there. Just all around very enjoyable to drink, but not one where I'm going to be like, we're out at a restaurant, it's on the menu, and I'm like, that's the one, clear cut, got to get that one. Unless there's like nothing else there, and it's just a bunch of other like meh wines.
Okay, you'll talk me up to a 6.2 because I really did like it a lot, and I'm a little bit afraid to take a sip of the black box.
Should we do that together? So now we're gonna go with the black box 2021, probably 2022, maybe.
It's either 2020 or 2021.
2021 Cabernet Sauvignon.
So same grapes, just not even the same. Oh God, the smell is
Getting
so different.
A lot of like,
it's just so much sweeter, and like to me, it's like very vanilla.
So I was gonna say like,
almost like milk chocolate,
like plastic and cork on the nose. You can go with milk chocolate if you want.
You're not wrong.
Very liquidy, a lot less.
Yes.
Like, less
oh my gosh, it is.
goes down like water.
Hear that as you're drinking it, you would never think to say that, but yeah. There's just not the same layers that.
Yeah.
Tobin James Cabernet Sauvignon, 10 out of 10.
It's all, everything's relative.
We're really, really scientific with our scales.
It's a great wine. If you see it, get it. Definitely very enjoyable. Black box is not bad. It is just not that.
It's just different.
Mm-hmm.
There's different time, different place. He is the king of like every drink has a time and a place. Like a gin and tonic is for the beach. A Sauvignon Blanc is like after you cut the grass. Mm-hmm. And like, I mean, every drink has a time and a place.
Mm-hmm. I think that the black box is the after show.
The black box is the after show
you've
wine.
Done a half of a podcast and watched a movie. That's the time and place for that one. No, it's a good all around wine.
It's a good, like, I want a glass of wine to wind down at the end of the day without having to like open a whole bottle of wine. Psh.
Yeah. The Tobin James Cab Sav, I would say it's like I'm at a, you know, mid to upper nice restaurant, see the wine menu, I'm gonna order something and order a wine, and I'm gonna seek that one out and have it with my my, you know, nice pasta dish.
Oh God, that sounds so good. Now I'm hungry. Thanks.
I wouldn't really classify that one as a steak. I feel like there's a bit more like berry and more complexity going on that I would want with a steak, but I think pasta would be where I'd go with that one.
You're so great. I love how specific
We're
you are.
basically sommeliers, so.
Yeah, let me see you study for that test. All right. Anyways, we've got to move on back to this movie. So, The Big Sleep, 1946. What's your rating out of 10?
4.3.
Okay. I was going to give it like a 4.5.
Yeah.
Honestly, first hour, I was like, I like this so much better than last week. Easily like 6.2 to 6.5 range. Like I was really into it. And then it just kept going. And
there were so many names and
so hard to follow.
I feel like I didn't get enough of a idea of who the face was that belonged to each name.
Yes, I need a face and a name and a little bit of a backstory to be able to grasp who that person is and what their role is.
That by the end of it, it was almost comical. I'm like, oh, they're introducing more freaking people we haven't seen yet. I just didn't really know who was doing what, and there was so much theoretical. I feel like I need to watch this like 6 times to understand all of everyone's roles and who they were and what they did. Yeah. I even read the plot summary from Wikipedia, like when we were.
Yeah, I asked him if it helped, and he said no.
I had to keep scrolling back up to be like, have they mentioned this person yet? Okay, yes, there was just so much going on there. Maybe it's a fantastic book because they might give you a little more like, you know, really hammer home who everyone is. But this is based on a book. Mm-hmm. I just feel like I did not get enough information of who everyone was, which kind of made it harder to enjoy. I think on a rewatch, I might rate it a little higher because I thought that seemed like it was pretty fun. But there was just, it was
we'll talk more about all the specifics in our notes, I'm sure. I have some notes about the actual movie in general, but why don't you just try
I've been like fearing this for the last like half an hour.
No, it took about 30 minutes ago. I was like, oh no, he's going to have to give a summary of this
And I was
movie.
like, all right, so private detective gets hired because someone has gone missing, and the guy...
Was he hired for someone that got missing?
That Sean Reagan, is that what his name was? Something?
Sure.
Yeah. Turns out that his daughters are mixed up in some bad crew, and there's gambling and drugs and murder involved. And in the end, he falls in love with one of the daughters and kills the gangster that was behind possibly all of this. I don't even know how anyone could do this justice.
I can't even tell you if you're right.
Is ever going to.
I don't even know why he was hired in the first place. I thought he was hired because something to do with, more specifically with his daughters, but I guess they were involved in all of it anyways.
Yeah, I guess there was the gambling debts too, but there's something that went missing. Like allegedly ran off to Mexico.
Let me read the TV summary and we'll
need to refresh it for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just refresh the screen. And okay, according to the TV, private investigator Philip Marlowe is hired by wealthy General Sternwood regarding a matter involving his youngest daughter Carmen. Before the complex case is over, Marlowe sees murder, blackmail, deception, and what might be love.
Ooh, might be.
Honestly, great description. There's obviously 1,000 layers in this movie, but I think that's a good description of the movie.
I was so confused because I thought that he said his name was Riley at first, but then he said his name was Marley, and then it's Marlowe. Maybe it's just his way of speaking.
Okay, your Marley confusion is definitely his accent and how he speaks. He did tell Carmen, I believe it has to be some kind of like pop culture reference or something, because she said he was really short. I think it was like a reference to his height. It was like Riley something. There was a name he had for that.
Yeah.
I think there was something more, some kind of joke that we don't get because this was a long time ago.
Possibly, yeah. It's not right over our heads. So that's the description.
Was the movie what you expected? Not
at all. The only thing that I predicted was that there was a private investigation or private investigator. I don't think anything else that I ever thought happened.
So my guess was that there was a private investigator / detective and that someone died big sleep. So I think I'm 2 for 2.
Yeah, you crushed it. Very vague, works to your favor. But I really don't I don't know how anyone could have predicted that. It was just a very complex web that if you predicted that, that's just...
Yeah, the gambling I was not expecting. I don't know. There's a lot.
How well did it age? I guess it aged fine. Given that it is based in a certain time period. Nowadays, I think a lot of this would be a bit more of a complex, online global type. If they were making something on the same general plot line, be a big global conspiracy theory type thing,
and with a little bit more violence. Step that up a little.
Yeah, I think some of the gangsters were pretty weak, where they were just we might punch you. And
all the fighting and the gun scenes are so unbelievable to me.
Yeah, especially knowing that's how they were portraying gangsters and beating up guys. They were a lot more violent from what I know of the mobster gangster scene, especially in that time period where it would be very easy to get away with murder. Just kill someone and then no one's gonna find you if they didn't see you do it.
Yep. I was thinking about that, how
great was ballistics or fingerprinting or obviously DNA
no
evidence
DNA,
wasn't a thing. No cameras,
security cameras, none of that stuff. Yeah. How to get away with murder. Do it in the 1940s.
Could this movie be made today? Yeah, I kind of reference.
Let's do it and make it so that we can follow it.
Yeah, a lot more pictures and names as they introduce people to really hammer home who everyone is.
That is true. I feel like that is something that they do a lot more in movies today. Of
you
picture. It's whether it's on one of the bulletin boards with all the strings connected or some kind of really cheesy graphic where they show.
Yeah, sometimes they do a freeze frame and they show this person what their role is.
Whatever it is, it's a lot more.
I actually think that was kind of cheesy. Now I very much would appreciate that.
Yes, I appreciate it a lot more now.
Did they say the title of the movie in the movie? Surprisingly, I don't think they did.
I don't think they did.
That's very disappointing.
Wow, I didn't realize how disappointed I was until just the second. Yeah, I'm disappointed they didn't say that.
It seemed like one they really could have stuck in there and really hammered home, and they just didn't.
Yeah, it could have been really cheesy or it could have been really subtle, but really well done, and they just lost an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Just that's honestly the surprise of the century there. Does the title fit the movie? I don't think so.
Yeah, there's a lot more going on than just calling it The Big Sleep. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I would have done something more along the lines of like playing with words with like gambling and like murder or something of like, I don't know.
I'm sitting here just waiting because your titles are always so good.
I feel a lot of pressure now.
I'm sorry.
Playing with fire doesn't really work there. There was no fire in there, but something along those lines of like, you know,
rolling the dice.
Yeah, something like that maybe. I don't know. If I think of a better one later, I'll let you know. But
we can revisit that and slept on it.
I think it could have been done better, but obviously being that it was based on a book.
Yeah, I don't know how much information there will be about that, but I would be interested to do a little bit of a dive into the title and to see if there is any kind of reasoning behind
Well, when I searched for The Big Sleep and searched it on Wikipedia, the first thing was like that it would say common phrase for like dying or something or death. And then apparently this was remade in like the 70s. So, and there's obviously the novel as well that I referenced. Were there any actors that went on to do bigger things? Obviously our boy Humphrey, I don't know if you would say went on to do bigger things or this was like his golden era.
Yeah. Cause, I have a deep dive prepared for next week where I have dove into him a little bit, and which started last week a little bit and continued this week. But I believe his first role was in 1930 or 1931. So he'd been around a good bit at this point and was definitely a well-known name by 1946.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about his life, and I can't wait for that.
Oh, fascinating. I mean, like...
a whole episode just for him.
Honestly, I didn't even go too deep because I was trying not to be over the top with how long I was talking, but like, he's a fascinating man. Like, we'll scratch the surface just a little bit because in the pre-production, like photo shoots and stuff for this, he left his third wife to marry the main actress, or Mrs. Rutledge, Lauren Bacall. Like they had fallen in love in a previous film, but it wasn't until they were doing the like pre-production photography for this where he was like, peace out, third wife, and he married her.
Fourth time's the charm, they say.
Yep. And they were together until he died.
Ah, fourth time is the charm.
And they had a son together, and that's all I could think about the whole time because I did know that before going into it.
Wow, that kind of changes the dynamic there. I mean, it seemed like there was a bit of chemistry there, so that definitely would make sense.
Yep.
There was also
we had a three-peat.
Elijah Cook Jr., the actor who was in Stranger on the Third Floor, The Maltese Falcon, and now The Big Sleep as well, playing different roles. He was
but the same kind of character,
which is wild because he, I believe, based on my rough math, was about like 42, 43 when this was filmed. This was released in 46, filmed in 44.
Really?
Yeah.
That long of a production time?
Well, no, it's just delayed because of the war. There was a lot of...
There's just some stuff going on. That's
right. So he looks like he's like 19 in all the movies that we've seen, and they've taken place over a 5-year period, obviously filmed in like a 3-year period, but he looks way younger than in his 40s.
Yeah, I mean, I see that he looks like he's super young, but then at certain angles, I'm like, okay, you're either 19 or you're 40. There's not really an in between.
Or 1946. Yeah, he's got that like young face vibe, which I think
he looks like a little puppy.
But I mean, people like Joseph Gordon-Levitt today could go back and play like a high schooler, today. That I think there's just people that just look like that all the time.
But I also thought it was really interesting that he played the same type of character. I mean, he was kind of one of the bad guys. I mean, he was framed in the first one, but like he was
kind of weak.
Yeah, and he also in the Maltese Falcon and this one he was trailing Humphrey Bogart in both of them. And are you the guy that's been like trailing me all day? And I'm like, oh my god, are we watching last week's movie again?
They must have been like best friends or something and just wanted to be in all these movies together.
Oh, I hope so. I hope there's some kind of like bromance behind the screens. Bromance.
Moving on, what impact do you think this movie had on pop culture?
I mean, I think it was just another one of, it was one of the titles I saw repeatedly. So I'm sure
I definitely
it was very
heard
popular.
the name before of the movie. I don't know if they necessarily referred to this one. Probably more likely they referred to this one than this 1970s version. But maybe based on the fact that it was later remade, kind of brought more popularity to it. I don't know how popular it was at the time. It looks like it was rated a 7.6 out of 10 stars, but a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. So obviously hindsight is more like 2020, and people generally like have nostalgia for some of these older movies, but it was highly rated at the time. I don't really know if I noticed too many things that I would associate with film noir, like from watching this. So I don't know how much it really fills in with that for me, but I do, I guess, see this being another big like Humphrey Bogart, movie, and
especially with him being the lead man too.
Yeah, another private detective, film thing. Last question being, do you feel cultured after watching it? I think not as much as I did after watching The Maltese Falcon.
Yes. I mean, honestly, the first little bit, I was like so into it. And I was so excited about it. I just feel like I was just like going to take so much from it. And then it just declined over the course of the movie.
I will say I'm still kind of disappointed we've not seen a like really, the stereotypical film noir, like, dark, rainy night, private detective voiceover. There was no voiceover in these
it
two.
It was late at night, and so and so private detective so and so was
walked in my office, and there I didn't see any of that in this. So I don't know if that just never happened. It just became like a caricature out of nothing, or if we just haven't seen one of those. So if someone knows like that movie or one of those like movies, please like let us know. But so far I've not seen that at all.
Yeah, we might have to do some research to see if we can find something like that.
The source material.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to do our film noir checklist now and then jump into our notes?
Let's move into how noir you are.
You can make it a thing. I'm just gonna at this point that phrase has been stuck in my head all week.
How noir yar. Ar-yar. How noir yar.
It's even better every time you try to say it right. This is our film noir checklist from Todd at the blog The Cinema Monolith. These are the things that he thinks really makes up a true noir film. So number 1, it's made in the classic noir period of 1940 to 1958. Yes.
Easy check.
Black and white.
Check.
Short and square, under 100 minutes, and square aspect ratio. It was square-ish. It was not under 100 minutes.
So half, 2.5.
Yeah, 2.5. Made and set in the U.S. Yes.
3.5.
Crime, murder, guns.
4.5.
All of them. Double crosses, flashbacks, voiceover. I think I feel like there has to be some double crosses, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say double crosses, but then you lost me with the flashbacks and voiceover.
Yeah.
So we'll keep it at. We'll put it at 5, maybe.
Yeah, we'll give it a half for that one. Dangerous Babes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
6.
Riding the Rails. No.
Mm-mm.
From Dusk Till Dawn. Yes, most of it did take
7.
place at night. And ends on a sour note. No?
I don't think so. So on a scale of 0 to 10,
Was it 6?
did I say 6, 7? 7?
Sure.
It's 7. That's how noir you are. The Big Sleep.
So far the Maltese Falcon wins. I believe Stranger on the Third Floor was 6. So that's
How
I can't even say it. I won't say it. All right. Do you want me to start off with my notes?
Sure, you can go with your notes first.
Okay. So my first note is just, first of all, I just cannot get over how short his tie is and how high his pants are.
I kept noticing that, being like, it's just, he looks very like smooth.
Derpy.
Except for that one thing.
Yep. And I know that it was such a sign of the times, but I had a hard time getting over it and taking him seriously. Also, as soon as I wrote this note, I didn't really feel it quite as much, but something about how he was talking or what he was saying at the very beginning reminded me of the main guy in Angels with Filthy Souls from Home Alone.
I could see that.
And
being black and white also helps.
Yes. And I had to Google it to make sure I had the title right, since it's obviously a fake movie. But I think he said something, and I was like, that reminds me of Home Alone.
See, he reminded me more of just every time we go to our grandparents' house and they've got on 19 layers and are like freezing, and we are like in shorts and short sleeves, like profusely sweating, because that's exactly the situation that was going on there. Humphrey was just like pouring sweat this guy is just like has 19 layers on. They're in like a greenhouse, and just how I feel every time we go to like a grandparent's house in the summer.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And then also the general's house is just, and I've noticed this in other movies from this time period, all the houses just look so like stiff and uncomfortable. Like I can't imagine being like, oh, I feel at home here. Like let me kick my shoes off and sit down. And even just like being in, I guess her name's Vivian, Miss Rutledge's bedroom. Her bed doesn't even look comfortable. It just looks like a cardboard box, like a very square, made so perfectly that I don't know. I don't know how you ever felt like comfortable at home in a house like that.
Yeah, very weird. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable in a home with like having a butler and everything, just kind of not being like alone ever.
Yeah. But yeah, I also thought that was weird. And there was a couple times where like a butler has answered the door, and I've always been like, in the movies, not in our personal lives. Yeah. And it was just very unsettling. And then after Geiger. After Geiger dies, and then Humphrey Bogart's character goes back to the house after he dies. He takes Carmen back to her house, and he goes back to the Geiger house. Why did he go back? I don't know.
Get his car.
He's just like super boldly walking around this house. He's not armed that we can see. And he's just poking through the beaded curtains, which are not subtle. Having had beaded curtains, you know when someone's coming in.
Yeah. I thought that too. I was like, if someone had come back there, which they very easily could have in that time, like you
obviously someone came back there, they took the body.
He's just, looking around, not watching his back the whole time.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing.
It was just seemed very stupid. I mean, I guess that's also that like you watch a scary movie and you're like, oh, clearly
Murderer.
Go get in the car that's running and leave. But like, oh, never mind. It's like those old like insurance commercials. Remember? Like, oh, let's walk through the field of chainsaws.
Yeah.
It obviously, like you said, hindsight's 20/20, but it just felt like a silly move. My next note is what I really loved about this movie though was I felt like there was some good comedy to it though. Like Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, like they're back and forth when she calls the police, and then he is like, oh, like talk to my mother, and she's like, oh, talk to my father, and then like my daughter doesn't like that. It was just this like really fun back and forth.
Trying to play it off like nothing's actually happening and confusing the operator.
Yeah. And then there was another thing he mentioned, maybe like the blood stain on the floor, that maybe he just enjoyed he really enjoyed his meat, and he just liked to butcher the meat himself in his living room. Like that's why there was a blood stain on the floor. There's just some like very subtle jokes that I was like, oh, this is actually very funny.
I noticed him throwing a lot of like really underhand, subtle like jokes.
And I feel like that's not something I had really gotten as much from the last two movies, that this one actually had a little bit more.
He did a little bit in the previous one, but yeah, did definitely a lot more.
Yeah.
Definitely like an order of magnitude more in this one.
I appreciated the comedy. Good work. I also thought it was interesting how they used the street signs for transition to really set the scene of
show where they are or that they moved.
And I also feel like they referenced like the street addresses a lot more in this, of like, oh, we're going to Laverne Street or whatever, and which is something I don't think is as common anymore, but just something I started to notice towards the end.
Like It's a Wonderful Life, 320 Sycamore. I think it's the number. Like just like specifically calling out an address. They almost like said it in this one, like we the audience should know where they're going, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with where you are. Also on a comical note, but I loved how his the guns in his car just like flipped down the first time. That was it was almost like a Inspector Gadget, like futuristic kind of like, let me get my gun from this little flap.
I had a note that I got a lot of like James Bond 007 vibes from just like kind of how he carried himself and was like a womanizer for all these people. He almost like acted like he was like James Bond's spy, but then also had like that gadget secret compartment in his car to flip down with the guns. I kind of almost want to look to see if some of this inspired like the James Bond
that would be interesting.
Movies and whatnot, or original material of that, because it seemed like I could see a lot of like
I can see
subtle
that for sure.
references.
Yeah. But I also thought it was interesting because I feel like between last week with the Maltese Falcon and this one, it wasn't until that he flipped the guns down in his car where he himself was armed that we saw. He was always like taking guns from other people last week. And even in the Maltese Falcon, he says he like doesn't he's not armed. He
doesn't keep guns, except it has them at his office.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, maybe that's just like something like personally Humphrey Bogart was like very passionate about, was not being someone that carried a gun. And then he, in the last like third of the movie starts flipping down his little gun pouch thing. And
I did like how he made like a joke of like, people just keep giving me guns after he like disarmed this guy and stolen his gun.
But I mean, that was also his MO last week too, that he just like takes them from other people. So I did enjoy that. And I feel like this is where the continuity of themed seasons is really coming into play. So I'm appreciating where we're taking this now. I've just got 2 more notes. Do private detectives ever sleep? Because I feel like,
they showed him sleeping. He slept until 2 because he had gone to that party.
And I mean, I wrote this note and then he slept. It was, which is of course how it happened. But he was like, you woke me up at 2 p.m., which I was like, okay, thank you. Like, I feel like you must sleep the weirdest hours and kind of be at the beck and call of your clients, especially in the 40s when I'm sure it's was a lot more necessary to have this kind of job and not be cloaked by the like 9 to 5 hours.
But I also wonder if more at that time, like anything after like 8 p.m. was like middle of the night. It's like, oh, he was up like really late at night and it was like, 12:15
perhaps.
And like that was, as late as it went. I could see a lot of this stuff being a bit different nowadays where it's not uncommon for places to just, be up all night.
Yeah, but there's, all sorts of things like the police detective called him at 2 a.m. or whatever, middle of the night, to go see the car that had run off into the river and just everything. I just kept being like, does this man ever get any sleep? Like, it's hard to sustain a lack of sleep.
That's why he got paid the big bucks, $25 a day.
You're not wrong. All right. And then my last note is revisiting the crime scene. They go back to Geiger's house a good jillion times. And I guess the police still don't know he's dead. But they just keep going back in there using the key that they clearly stole from him and just keep going in and out like it's not a big deal. And these are
the first time and Geiger's dead on the floor. The second time, there's no one there in the whole place. The third time, Geiger's like on his bed, right? Like propped up or something.
Was that Geiger or was that, I forgot about that. Oh my God, who even was that?
I thought that was Geiger. I thought they like put him in there and like the fourth time it's just they're going
Maybe
back
it was
to
Geiger. That would make more sense.
Weird, he'd be smelling like ass by then.
Probably.
Pretty dead and decomposing. Yeah. So
new name instead of the big sleep. Just like pretty dead.
Yeah. I don't
know. I just kept being like, I don't really know why you're still going back here because
it wasn't even his house. He was like renting it apparently from this gangster. Or maybe that was just, I don't know if he meant that.
I don't even know. I don't know.
Yeah. So much.
What a weird movie. All right. So that's
like at the time, like if you're going to the movie theaters and you're watching this, like you walk into the theater and you're like, what the heck just happened? You can't go on Wikipedia. You might ask your like friend who also saw it and they're gonna be like, I don't know either. I guess we got to pay 5 cents and go watch it again.
Yep. I don't understand that because we sit and watch these movies and we're on Wikipedia the entire time.
Yeah.
Honestly, Wikipedia should be a sponsor of this podcast because we just sit and we're like, let me learn.
Like what happened.
Especially for movies like this where we don't really know any of these actors. Like we're the ones that are from the like late 80s, 90s, 2000s, we're relatively familiar with, but it's like, okay, when were these people born? 1890, what, like all of that stuff
they
is
really
just
dumbed movies down
wild.
now where we can't go back and watch these old ones because we don't get like things like really drilled into us where they say the same person's name like 100 times to, I don't know. Crazy.
It is so interesting though to see how movies have changed. It is wild.
So move on to my notes. First note was that this was a much different set / location than our last 2 weeks. That felt like they were almost the same movie in a way. The sets felt very similar. This one felt a lot different. Just from the very beginning of walking into that mansion and then going into a greenhouse, it didn't feel like you were just like in nondescript apartment in nondescript city, which I thought was kind of a nice change of pace there. After a while, a little bit of it did feel kind of similar to the style of the previous two when they're like more in the city a little bit. But
there was not as much of like the big, like not that we really saw. No, there were no drone shots, but I felt it felt a lot more city in the other two, whereas this one definitely felt a little bit more like suburban.
Yeah, for sure. So he said he made $25 a day as a private detective for his like expenses and whatnot. That would be equivalent to $390 a day, which, assuming he worked 365 days a year, would be about like $140,000 a year. Just for reference of what that means. Obviously, he would not be working every single day, but just to get kind
As
of
a private detective, maybe you do.
You might.
Thank you for doing the math for all of us.
Just kind of ballpark that.
I was like, I know that that's not nearly what he would be making today, but I needed some reference.
I'm always so interested when I hear those numbers thrown out where it seems like I see things where like $500, that's so much money. And I'm like, nowadays it's not that much, but you're acting like it's like a fortune. And then I do the conversion. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's like quite a bit more. It's like $10,000, much different than 500. I did say that the scene where he's in the library, it seemed like she was like the thirstiest librarian ever. I don't know if that's like one of the original like librarian lust crushes that like little boys have based on this or something, because I guess that was channeling his inner James Bond, flirting with like every girl he possibly meets. He also was flirting with the taxi driver and everyone.
I did love the taxi driver. I wish I made a note about her because she was funny. That librarian bookstore lady girl, it's not like he was flirting with her, but she was putting herself out there too.
She was hot for a guy who knew his books. For sure. She's been waiting for him to walk in that door.
And just like quickly walked up and like closed the lock, pulled the blinds.
But they also didn't make any allusions to them like having hooked up or anything. It seemed like they literally just like drank some rye, talked about books, watched the Across the Street, which like, good for them.
I'm just still holding out hope that there was something a little
in the sequel. We'll find out.
A little mischievous happening there.
I thought the small, or I guess the town they were in, reminded me a lot of the set of Bedford Falls from It's a Wonderful Life, just kind of in the look of it, which makes a lot of sense because they were filmed very much like the same time period. Just felt very much like I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that set overlapped. Might have been the same studio and everything.
I also kept getting like Wizard of Oz vibes, weirdly enough. And I don't know if it was just like the style of acting or like the fact that some of the houses were not, it was like houses and not city apartments. But and obviously they were filmed a couple of years apart, but similar-ish time. But
yeah,
I got
it's
taken.
Probably gonna be the same like cameras and lenses and everything you use, which is.
I also felt like this week's movie, I was like, oh, this is filmed on a set more than any of the other weeks, especially like the Geiger's house. As soon as they pulled up to especially like his cul-de-sac or whatever it was, I was like, this just doesn't feel real. I feel like I'm watching a movie set.
Yeah, for sure. I thought it was interesting with the license plate being inside of the car. Just felt like nowadays, obviously, people have license plates which do not have your name and contact information. Every time he was trying to figure out who was following him or who owned a car, he would open up the car door, look like under the steering column, and there was like a plate that said like the name, like maybe the address, like who owned the car.
I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah. I wonder when that kind of thing changed of like putting your ownership details inside the car versus something much less directly attributable to a single person, but just by looking at it in a license plate.
Yeah.
It'd be much more useful for a private detective to be like, oh, here's the person that owns the car right here.
But also, did like nobody lock their cars? Or was locking not a thing on cars? I felt like every time he was just like, oh, this person followed me. I'm just going to pop right in here. Oh, flip this down. This is who owns this car. This is where they live. And I will walk out.
Or maybe like hitmen were just like, I'm going to leave it unlocked all the time because who knows when I might need to like run the heck away and hop into my car and don't want to like fumble with keys or.
Practical.
Might have just been kind of that, I'm gonna have this slight risk to possibly save my life later. That someone might take my, I don't know, croissant out of my car that I left there. Because what else they're not gonna leave their phone. I got their wallet on them.
Yes. I'm gonna insert one more note quickly here. There was one point where Phil Humphrey was in his office and he was sitting at his desk and Miss Rutledge comes in and I was like, he doesn't have a computer on his desk. And like, obviously I know there were not computers in 1946, but just to like really see it and really think about just how different life was. It's just, my brain has such a hard time with it. It's just such a different time.
So many things where it's not even just like, oh, they could have easily solved this with their computer or their phone. It's also hard just to reconcile. They just didn't have that at all. And
that you just have to know people and you have to talk to people and you have to.
It's exhausting.
To like find the right book with the right information to know what you need to know. I mean, it's all.
You have to go to the library and do research.
Yeah, you have to go somewhere to figure something out.
Dewey Decimal System.
It's my brain. It's wild, and I think because it's not like, oh, this movie was made in 2010 but set in the 40s, like because it was actually at that time. It just it's my brain just can't.
Yeah,
It's
there
wild.
aren't going to be really anachronisms there when it's like literally filmed in the time period that it was set into.
It's crazy.
There was another instance of slapping sense into a woman. I guess when Carmen was at that party and she was kind of like high, or I don't know what she was on, like opium tea or something, and he like slaps some sense into her, which I feel like was a very like sexist like trope that was just repeated in a lot of movies.
Was that when Geiger first died?
I think so.
Okay. But did he also shake her once she killed that Joe Brody or whatever? Or was it just...
I think it was just then.
Just then. I mean, it was definitely one time where it was noticeable, like, wake up!
And then, psh, psh. And I feel like that was like a real sexist thing of like women. The woman was hysterical. I had to slap some sense into her. And I'm like, I'm really glad that trope has kind of died because it seems extremely sexist and just...
over all of that.
Yeah. Very, very stupid. We covered the 007 part with James Bond, the Elijah Cook Jr. part, and then the last part that I had was the really like weak love story where
it was
Humphrey,
very forced.
yeah, and like what was her name?
The girl he fell in love with?
Yeah.
Miss Rutledge, Vivian.
Yeah, Vivian.
I don't think they ever say that her name is Vivian. It wasn't until I looked on Wikipedia that I knew that.
But
he always refers to her as Miss Rutledge.
It was just really kind of weak where she's like, I think I love you. And then later he's like, I think I love you too. Like there's nothing really that's happened. This all takes place over like 48 hours. It's just been kind of weird. And I think they really just kind of wanted a love story finish that I wouldn't be surprised if that was a producer pushing for that in the post-production.
Maybe. And I love the connections. But also, I feel like she was married. She was like, she's credited as Mrs. Rutledge. So what happened to her husband? I think that was I feel like I vaguely remember something about that.
So you mentioned, the guy I mentioned, General, was like, one of my daughters is married, the other one not.
Mm-hmm. She was the married one.
I agree, but was that something where was she married to someone who like disappeared or was killed?
I don't know. But I mean, she was definitely the married one of the two.
Definitely never saw a hug.
Yeah, and if she was all blinking her eyes and laying in his car trying to get
always like laying down when she got in the car.
We both could not handle it like that.
She
like
was
he would drive and she would just sink down and just look up at him, and I don't know. That was it was weird. But yeah, I need a more of a backstory on her. She was hard to follow. And their love story was very, again, like you said, very weak.
Like weak and kind of very much forced.
But what's a movie without a love story?
A movie? I don't know. Doesn't all have to have love stories, but
I don't know. It seems to be something that Hollywood like throws in everything.
Yeah. So that's about all I have for this movie.
The Big Sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I'm ready to kind of go to sleep because it was just a lot going on, and my brain is very tired of trying to follow it all and process it all. And
I'm excited to like reread the Wikipedia article like 7 or 8 times until I get it, because I think there was a lot to unpack there, but just was far too much for just a one-shot viewing.
Yeah, we'll see what we come back with next week when we get into our slept on it and how we feel about it a week from now after reading it all again and trying to process it all. But
after a big sleep,
I did like it. It was just I liked parts of it. All of it together was hard to follow.
It'd be interesting to someday watch the remake. I'm not planning on it for this season, but just to see
I would like that.
What they do differently.
For sure.
Cool.
So cheers to another Film Noir in our buckets. And if you are enjoying the podcast, make sure you rate and review, like, subscribe, follow, all the things. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Culture Night Pod. And if you have any other thoughts, comments, things we should watch, movies or different genres, we are getting ready to think about what we're going to do for season 3. So if you have any genres you want us to watch,
or actors, or any sort of theme,
any fun theme, we're down to switch it up. Leave those in the comments on YouTube, or leave a comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you can do
Twitter,
those things.
Instagram.
Yep. And join us next week to see what we come up with after processing this, because it's a lot.
And we'll still be doing Film Noir next week, just probably with a slight little twist.
Yes, we're switching up a little bit. So cheers, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Cheers.